I remember a few years ago, I reached out to you. I was going to teach shift for KWYP. And I figured we have a generation of people in our company that have never lived a market that you and Dave and Jay wrote this book for, right? They wrote this in 2008 in a buyer's market. Gosh, if they got in the business after 2011, they've never experienced one. So I reached out to you and I said, what advice would you give? And you told me the only way to get ahead is to act like the market that's coming, not the market that you're in.
Yeah, that's right.
We're in a crazy hot market. Can you talk a little bit about that right now? Why is that so important?
Well, because the markets always change, right? Essentially the reason why they call it an economic cycle is because what goes up comes down and what comes down goes up. So my advice is and this is I take this advice, James, and that is every day operate in the market you're in while at the same time recognizing that it's going to shift. That's all. So don't take it for granted because shifts happen suddenly. I remember our friend Dave Jinks, who was an avid golfer, would pull out a golf club and he would demonstrate that an economic cycle is experienced just like a golf swing. So he would take his golf club and he would rear it back like this. And then he would demonstrate a golf swing. And what happened is that it's slow here and speeds up as it goes. So there's a lot of momentum. You may feel the shift right here, but it's everything. It didn't happen overnight. There were things that were happening. And if you weren't paying attention to it, you would all of a sudden, you'd be suddenly shocked by it. So it's just a simple idea that says when you wake up in the morning, be happy in the moment you're in, but be prepared for the future at the same time. That's all. Because it's going to happen. It will happen and it will shock you. It's almost like Goodbye American Pie, the day the music died. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Having been in this business for over 44 years, I can assure you, I've seen enough of these because it comes with regularity. The only weird thing right now is that we're in unprecedented times for a couple of reasons, but one of them is the prolonged recovery.
Yeah, it seems like we've been in this seller's market forever.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you go back and look at the info that Jay and Jason and I and Ruben put up at the vision speech, and you look at it, we dropped off a cliff. And actually it happened in the last quarter of 2005, really. They didn't report it as an economic recession until 2008, but it actually happened in 2005 and 2006. You could see it. If you were paying attention, you could see it. Mm-hmm. But economic cycles usually occur in like a rhythm of 7 to 9 years. There's just a rhythm to it. You go back and look and you'll see it. So if that happened in 2008, let's just call it 2008 for the fun of it, then we should have by 2015, 16, no later than 18, we should have been in a real economic cycle. But we didn't. We did just the opposite. It just kept going. COVID hit and literally everybody thought, okay, this is it. Because economic cycles are mainly caused by the government. And the reason is because when things are really good, then they want to literally go ahead and raise interest rates back up because when things are really good, it gets overheated and they don't like that, right? And then things are bad, they lower rates, they lower the cost of money, they do the economic decisions that they need, dials, if you will, that they turn in order to ratchet the economy up and down. And they never get it right. It's not because they don't know what they're doing. It's because once they start it, they don't know how far it'll go. Right, either direction. So most of the time, the challenges of the economy have been caused by the government. The desire to ramp things up. I remember when it started out, I think, with Clinton, but it was a plan that Cisneros, who was the governor of San Antonio, the mayor of San Antonio, excuse me, had come up with to try to increase the overall percentage of homeowners in America. And man, that was a disaster because what they started doing was creating, if you could fog a mirror, you got a loan.
Yeah.
Next thing you knew, you had people in houses that shouldn't be in it. Anyway,
Well,
I don't need to go any further on that. Yeah. So essentially, you're right. So
we've been in this ramp up now since 2011. And yet I tell you, this book is still completely relevant. It just reads a little bit differently, but excuse me, we have some uncertainty right now. You leave your house today to drive to KWRI. I don't know what the price of gas was as you were driving in through Austin. And I know here in the last week, it's gone up 50 or 60 cents, and it's a hot topic, and it is what it is. And you've got Russia and Ukraine, and you've got inflation, and you've got supply chain, and you guys covered all this at Family Reunion.
And you got COVID.
Yeah, and you've got COVID still is here. You've got all this uncertainty, and yet there's a house in my neighborhood, Gary, that is appreciated. It was sold and closed in December, and it went back on the market today, and it's $50,000 more than they paid for it, and they're going to get it this weekend. I mean, what is going on, and what is to come?
Yeah, well, I covered this in the vision speech. The bottom line is that we had the lost decade of new home construction, and literally I pointed this out every year since it started. Right? There's a number, and when you don't hit it, you're not replenishing the market, and so you just have you have a completely seller's market, and it's not going to go anytime soon because. It would, at the current pace now of building, you would get back to equilibrium in 20 years. Yeah, right. Right. Yeah. But that's the truth. So we're going to be a seller's market for a long time. And the only way that that's going to shift is a calamity. Because remember, the way you get out of a seller's market is when buyers collectively go, nah, I think I'm going to stay where I am.
Is there any thought, and pardon my interruption, I just got to ask you though, is there any thought at all that buyers might think that right now? Understanding that the people are always going to buy and sell, and that you always have a chance.
No, because we covered this, and the rich got richer.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, the cost of money has stayed ridiculously low.
Yeah.
Multiple percentage points below the historic average nationally. So no, money is still historically ridiculously cheap, and incomes are going up. So people have the money in order to do it. So here's the other ridiculous idea though, and that is every year we point out the 4% trend line on pricing.
Yep.
And then we talk about where we are in relation to that 4% annual appreciation or inflated home price. And you're not that far ahead of it.
Right. Well, you showed us last year. First of all, we had, or just showed us last month rather, we had below, and then we kind of got there, and then it's just a tick above. It's right. Really we've been catching back up for the last several years.
Yeah, that's right. So that's exactly right. And so it's really odd because you look up and you go, good God, this is overpriced. Mm-hmm. And then you look at the trend line and you go nationally, you go, wow, that's so weird because it feels ridiculously high. And yet the trend line says it's not ridiculously high compared to everything else. So, but here's what we know. What we know is that history says this would be the first time ever in mankind that prices just kept going up and never stopped. So you're a betting person, it's going to stop. Now, the last time we had this happen, which was the run up to 05-06,
right.
We had, I believe, I could be exactly wrong, but I believe we had 4 years above the trend line. In other words, prices
4 years above this 4% annual growth or appreciation.
We did.
So that's a warning sign.
Yep. Well, of course it is. And that is, it's outstripping affordability. That's all that means. Remember that a house, a lot of people in real estate, we understand this, but a house is the reason why home prices will always go up. So as realtors, we need to understand this. The reason why they're going to go up is because there'll always be new construction. And new construction is the current replacement cost of a house. And the replacement cost of a house, what's fascinating is it's the greatest storehouse of commodities of any product ever invented, right? You buy any product that you want, right? My phone here. My phone here is a product of a variety of commodities, from rubber to, right, you name it. It's all here. Glass, it's all here, right? Okay. My house has more commodities in it than and more different types of labor attached to it than any other product. So, right, it's got it all. And so as a result of that, the resale price of a house has usually been governed by the replacement cost. Now,
which is always going to be more. Right. So whether it's more expensive, it's harder to get. There's fewer people to do it. For a while we couldn't get lumber. I mean, so all of that stuff adds up, and boom, now you have stuff that goes up and goes up.
That's it. That's exactly right. So literally, that's exactly right. So, but at some point, if left out of control, you ultimately end up with prices where you have fatigue, and buyers simply go, "I'm going to take a year off."
Right.
And when they take,
that's what I think would happen. At some point, people are going to go look at, let's use gas because it's the big one right now. They'll look and go, hey, I'm not going to pay that much for gas, so we're going to drive less, or we're going to carpool, or we're going to do this, and maybe something like that changes.
But here's the thing is, the real estate pricing is no different than the stock market. So the stock market, in any 9 to 10 year period, roughly, is going to return a 9 to 10% return on your money. And that's since the very beginning of the exchange, going all the way back to the very beginning, James. So, but at any point in time, your portfolio could be up or down.
Yes.
But if you take it in any period of 9 to 10 years, go track it, it's going to average out 9 to 10. Now, by the way, it could be down 1% after 9 years, and in the 10th year, go up by 10. That you see my point. So
we track things over time. The bottom line is we track this stuff.
The bottom line is if you buy into the stock market, you need to understand that you need to be able to afford to leave your money in the market until the market ultimately delivers its average. By the way, a home is no different, because people, again, for decades asked me, man, is it a good time to buy? My answer is, that depends on your holding horizon. It's not just this answer of, oh, no, or, oh, yeah, right, prices are down, you should do it. I get
What's your motivation? Why are you thinking about it? What is it that has you considering buying? I mean, and that's where I want.
Here's the point Here's the point that I always tell my own buyers and sellers. It's not the fault of the real estate, and it's not the cause of the real estate as to whether you made money or lost money. It's your ability to hang on to the real estate long enough to experience the ultimate appreciation driven up by the cost of all the commodities that go into the replacement of it.
That's great.
Yeah.
I want to do one more thing.
If you have a good, so people say, should I buy today? It feels so high. What's our answer?
Well, it depends how long you live there.
If you're willing to commit that you can afford to stay here if you had to for 10 years, or hold it, even if you bought something else, but hang on to this line. And I always tell the story. I wrote it in MREI that the first investment property I bought, I paid 65 grand. And it was a set of properties. They were attached townhomes right off of downtown. And the value dropped to 19.5. I know that because the one next to it sold for 19.5. It was identical to the one I owned. By the way, I always made cash flow. I ultimately sold that property for like 92, 93, something like that.
You held it long enough.
Yeah, I held it long enough. It always cash flowed. And I ultimately sold it and got all my money back and made some money. Yeah.
But if you had to sell it when that person sold theirs, it's not the real estate's fault, right? That it was worth $19,000. It was because you chose to sell it in that moment, and it is what it is. Okay,
Sure.
I want to do one more thing. And Gary, thank you for taking the time to be on.
Remember, population is going to go up, and the amount of real estate that's for sale when it is always going to be trying to chase that.
Yeah.
And whenever you have a long-term undersupply, prices are going to inflate.
I love it. I have one more question.
Yep.
There's a page 28 of Shift says this, and I want your opinion on it, because what we've talked about is these are all things agents don't have control over. The market does what the market does, and they can't control prices, and they can't control that. But here's what they can control. Here's what you say on page 28. Business analysts had often pointed out that the seeds of failure are usually sown during times of success. The most humbling lesson of a shift is this: we succeed in good times, not only because of what we do right, but also in spite of what we do wrong. All right, you and Jay and Jason, everybody, and Ruben said at family reunion, we are in the market of instant sales. You put it on the market and it sells tomorrow. So we have a bunch of agents who are selling a ton of houses. Their volume is way up. They're making crazy money. And by the way, many of them are working hard. I'm not discounting anybody, Gary, but we have a lot of people who think they're really, really awesome. And whenever it flips, they're going to get coming. They're going to be exposed. Their lack of foundation or lead gen strategy or consistency is going to be exposed.
That's right.
What do you want to say to them?
Well, what you said it all perfectly, that what happens in a boom market is you become lazy on your fundamentals. You get so busy, you stop doing the fundamental things because you're so busy. I mean, I was on the phone with an individual earlier today, and she's just worn out. She's a single agent, has one admin person, and did over $1 million in GCI by herself. Made a lot of money, but she has 2 young boys, and she's worn out. And what happens in that moment is you drop the fundamentals. So when the market shifts, all of a sudden you look up and you don't have a backlog of business. That's what happens. That's the danger of good times. That's all. So the way I think about it is, on one hand, you always want to live in the market of the moment. But the market of the moment is not about the fundamentals. It's about your messaging. The market of the moment is about the messaging around how to attract buyers and sellers. That's what the market of the moment is about. It doesn't change the fundamentals of lead gen, right? Mm-hmm. When you think of the real estate business, the business that we're in, first and foremost, we're expected to be real estate experts. And if you're not a real estate expert in your local market and you're not a transaction expert, I don't know what you're doing for a living. I don't know who you are. I don't know what you do for a living. But
well, you said, real quick, you said that our job as real estate agents is to provide perspective to potential buyers and sellers. In order to do that, you have to understand what's going on.
That's well said. That's exactly right. So, but if you got that, if you're an individual who is constantly paying attention, you're a transaction master, you got that, and you understand the market, you understand the market dynamics in which you serve, we're good to go. Now, there's just a handful of fundamentals. We lead gen, we convert to appointments, we convert appointments to listing and buyer agreements. We transact and we transaction manage, and if we get listings, we market listings. That's it. That's what we do. That's it. In terms of professional actions, those are the moments where we deliver our expertise and our perspective, right? What happens is, depending on the market, people let the market dictate their daily routine around how they do business. And the point that we're ever trying to make is stop that. Every day you wake up, you manage your time exactly the same way. And you have a decision. If you want to work extra time and you want to make more money, that's awesome. Or you can hire leverage, make a little less money or a lot less money in the short term, but have time back and lay the foundation to grow. You make all these decisions you want, right? But the decision you should never make, and that is to drop the fundamentals. Don't ever do that. This is not a complicated business. When we wrote The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, what we were really trying to point out in the end was your database is your business. Your network is your net worth, right? And so the one thing you can't drop is your 33 touch, your 45 touch, whatever it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, every day, I'm trying to have a great career, not just a great year. So I understand this. And as an investor, I really understand this. And that is, I make investment decisions every day. My money doesn't necessarily make money every day.
That's good.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes a ton of sense.
Okay. So it's the same in real estate sales, meaning that every day I'm going to do the things necessary to ultimately, when I tally up the score, I'm going to have had a great career. And I'm a little agnostic to the market because I'm always going to live beneath my means. So I'm not desperate for this to be the year that I crush it. What I'm very,
because you're looking long term. This is who you are. This is what you do.
Yeah, if I live long enough, I better plan for it. Yeah. So the way I think about it is, here's a good example. And that is, if I wake up in the morning, my job as a realtor, my job description is to get to a millionaire database. That's job number one of everyone listening. Now, whether it's the millionaire, whether it's the half millionaire, whether it's the quarter millionaire, I mean, whatever database you want to stop at, but your job, when I meet someone, and I started thinking about this way when I was 22 years old, my job was not to sell you or list you. My job was to connect with you, put you in my database, and be your realtor for life.
Yep.
And what I knew is the path is in the math, and the law of numbers would ultimately drive me to success, whether I wanted it or not. So what happens is most agents wake up every day and they go, I got to make a sale.
Yep.
I never said that. I woke up every day and said, I have to add to my database. I have to touch
such a different perspective, Gary. That is such a different perspective.
My job is to connect with people and be there for them. Mm-hmm. And then I have to let the law of big numbers drive my income. But it doesn't drive my actions. My actions are driven by a fundamental understanding that my job is to connect with people and then stay in touch with them until they're ready to buy or sell. And I can't determine that. So I have to play the law of big numbers, meaning that I have to have a large enough database that I touch, that I have a relationship with at various levels, depending upon who's in my database, such that there's a large number every year that raises their hand and says, this is my year.
I love it.
And that's it. That's the game. And what's beautiful about this industry is it's really hard in the early period. But later, if you do that, it becomes the greatest business ever. But that would be true. My brother-in-law was an oncologist for up until just a few years ago. And he was one of the best in the city. He made a change. He decided to be I'm not sure what you call this, a concierge doctor or I think of it as a limited service doctor, meaning that he only has 50 clients now. He only has 50 patients.
Okay.
But each patient has to pay him $20,000 a year in order for him to be their doctor. He's the millionaire doctor.
He is.
With 50 clients. Now, how do you get there? Well, because he became the best, and he had such a large database that when he finally switched over and said, I'm going to quit being, Dr. Death, if you will. I'm going to quit being the cancer doctor, and I'm going to go into general practice. How can I have my best life possible? How can I get my life back? How can I not be on call 24 hours a day, if you will, and people lined up the door out the street and around the corner for me to do business with? So he went to his database and he told everybody, hey, I'm switching gears. Oh, by the way, instead of paying me X, you're now going to pay me this, and it's not covered by your insurance.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You're going to come out of pocket, right? And it's $20,000 for you, and it's $10,000 more for your spouse and your family. So I'll cover all of you for $30,000.
And he had 50 people say, sign me up.
90 days he filled up. He had so much, they brought another guy in, he filled up, and now they have a waiting list and they're thinking of adding a third. Okay. And all of that is because he was a master of what he was doing, and he maintained a relationship and a service relationship with the database.
It's a basic. I mean, you end the first chapter of Shift saying the basics never outdated, and that's proof of it right there. So,
well, and it's interesting because most agents spend all day trying to avoid the basics.
Well, that's what knocks them out, right? So if we can, the challenge we have right now.
That's right.
And Gary, I know we're up against the clock, but let's just get this part in. The challenge we have right now is you can not do the basics and sell houses and make money, and it's a pink fluffy unicorn. You can do that in 2022, but in 2037 or whenever it changes, you probably can't survive that way. Like it probably isn't going to work if you don't do the foundational things right now.
Well, if you're a professional, that's right. If you're a professional, the fundamental of any professional business is build a community and serve the community. That's it. That's all we do. And it doesn't matter if you're a doctor or a realtor. It doesn't matter if you're an architect. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter if you're a dog store. It doesn't, pet store, I mean. It doesn't matter if you're a hairstylist. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You build a community and you serve the community. And the size of your community is determined by you. You'll decide how big that community is. What happens is a lot of real estate agents outside of their family and friends, they don't have a community at all. You say, show me your database, show me your community. If all you could do was serve your community and you could never again provide any value to anybody outside of your community, show me that community.
There isn't one.
Oh my God. 95% or higher of the real estate industry would be broke overnight because they'd look up and they'd say, well, past my friends and family, I don't have a community. I haven't curated a community. I don't serve that community. You look up and you go, every business has a community. Apple has a community, and they've identified it, and they now serve that community.
Well, the more value
everybody
you add, the bigger the community
phone.
gets. What's that?
Yeah, I was going to say, everybody has a cell phone. They're not selling net new to the community.
Right.
If they are, it's not a whole lot.
Well, and the more value you add, the bigger the community gets at the end of the day. So if you add a ton of value and you check in on your people, they're going to tell everybody else around you, hey, since you brought it up, Sajid is here, so we'll bring him in. And we'll do this piece of it. And Gary, you stick around as long as you want. I'm never kicking you off Connect. We're just going to keep rocking and rolling. But we'll invite Sajid Patel into the conversation, because Sajid, what I wanted you to do was kind of give us the actionable coaching perspective of what Gary shared with us. And so as you've been on this whole time listening to this conversation, what are the takeaways and ahas from you from what Gary shared so far?
Well, hang on. I'm gonna turn the floor over to my phenomenal colleague Sajid, and I'm not going to interrupt him, so I'm going to go mute and silent. So,
all right, Gary, sounds good. Thank you so much for being on. I appreciate you very, very much, Sajid. So break it down. I mean, what are the takeaways from what Gary just shared with us?
I mean, it's simple, right? When the market gets really busy, we get away from the fundamentals. And when we look at the fundamentals of how do we make money, and Gary talks about your network is your net worth, means are we doing the fundamentals of lead gen and lead follow-up every single day? And from a coaching perspective, I could tell you that's the very first thing that everyone negotiates. It's the very first thing that comes off of everyone's counter, because a buyer calls and they want to go look at a home. Seller calls and says, I want you to come list my home. And so they'll erase it off their counter. They don't replace it. So it's real simple, James. We need to make sure that we stick to the fundamentals and making sure that we're role playing every day. Professional football players don't stop practice. Why do we?
Right.
We need to make sure we lead gen every single day, lead follow-up every day, and then keep the afternoons for going on appointments and writing contracts. If you just protect that, you're playing the long-term game, like Gary mentioned, instead of the short-term game where you ride the roller coaster that every real estate agent rides.
Well, and you're playing to win. I mean, at the end of the day, you're playing to win. You bring up a football player is always practicing. I'm here in Florida. It's supposed to be spring training right now. There is no spring training, but you know who's here? Players. Players are here. They're at USF's campus. They're at other campuses, and they're practicing and they're preparing so that when the lockout's over, they can get back after it. I love that. All right. So with the couple of minutes we've got left then, what are the key mistakes then, or the key ways to make sure you don't make those classic mistakes? How do you make sure you don't make the classic mistakes that agents are making right now, which is responding to the urgent and not staying in the fundamentals?
Simple. Keep your time blocks for your lead gen and lead follow-up as if you're going on a $10 million listing appointment. You wouldn't negotiate those. So why are you negotiating the key activities that generate money for you?
It's smart. All right, that's it, Sajid. I know you were on for a while, but we've had a hard stop for you, and I want to honor that. So I appreciate you being on. Any final thoughts, sir, before we kick it?
No, the only thing I would say is, it doesn't matter what level of production you're in. It doesn't matter if you're an individual agent or if you're a leader on a big team. It's getting back to, the fundamentals. MREA is still relevant. Shift is still relevant. And as leaders, what we see is people are getting away from the fundamentals of leadership. As agents, they're getting away from the fundamentals of being a great agent, which is making sure that you're lead genning and lead follow-up. As leaders, it's the same thing, except you're lead genning for talent. You're developing the relationships with talent. So how big is your talent database as a leader? And if you just think about it that way, you're going to grow a massive business.
And that's what it's about. Sajid, thank you. Thanks for being on. I appreciate you very much. And all the best to you. And Gary, thank you so much for being on as well. Folks, we had a great 2-day shift workshop, so many strategies, so many ideas, and so many wonderful guests. Do me a favor and start blowing up that chat with gratitude and ahas, because the things that we learned today and I feel like it feels like we've been on here for hours, and we have. But I mean, if you go back, the stuff Denny Grimes gave us